this is Neiman Kingsley, the old sage on the mountain. You may ask me 3 questions.
Are you really Neiman Kingsley?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
You?
Yes. Thank you. Come again.
Welcome back, guys, to part 2, which is exactly as part 1, but it's the number 2. Do you have anything to add, Neiman?
I don't know if I could top that. I think let's just
Alright, let's get
let's just get going.
So, yeah, I think I replayed this and at the end of part 1, my small value with the 10 that did not get called, and we were there.
You liked that so much you wanted to replay it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to remind everyone of how awesome it was. I hope you guys are not hearing my rocking chair right now. It's making kind of a squeaking noise, weird noise. I hope it can't be heard on the microphone.
I don't hear it, but is this the chair? This is the chair that you've been bragging about on your blog and everything?
Yes.
And now it's squeaking on you?
Yeah, the big league boy. So I isolate the fish with Jack 10, which is pretty standard, and I flat erase from under the gun, which is with Ace Queen, which is also pretty standard. And I 3-bet with King Queen suited, which is pretty standard, I think, with King Queen suited, but would be awful with King Queen offsuit. And I think we've discussed why already a couple of times.
Yeah, I was actually going to say though with well again, yeah, I guess we're 200 big blinds deep, so you want to have the spec. I think that the King Queen has enough pair value to go with the
to call the raise, basically.
Yeah, I think because it's you don't want to play this huge pot if you flop a king or a queen, 200 big blinds deep. But you're probably going to be good, and you can get some value from inducing bluffs or getting thin value out of him. So that coupled with the fact that you can then blow up the pot if you want, if you flop a good draw or something. I think I like a call here better. But we don't have to get into it. We've talked about this kind of thing a lot.
Yeah, let's just say it depends a lot on the player, and I feel that against most 2-4 regulars, since I'm very comfortable playing these re-raise spots, even out of position, even 200 big blinds deep. I feel I have more value with King Queen suited. Basically, I'm just re-raising here for value, like pure value, because I feel like I have the nuts, basically. And I think I know there is value by flat calling, but I think there's even more value with re-raising if I'm not against someone who's going to 4-bet me a lot out of my hand.
Yeah. That's the key. Like, I guess that's the consideration. You don't want to be 4-bet with such a nice hand. And that's but one that can't support a 4-bet. That's all. I mean, we've talked about this kind of thing a lot, and a lot of it comes down to the opponent, and a lot of it comes down to your own style as well that we've talked about. Let's quickly talk about table 2 as well. You have an under the gun raise from a player. I don't know.
What's his name? I can't low key line.
Low key, it seems like, low key.
Yeah, low key. I don't really see well in the screen, but yeah. I know he's a railer. I don't have a read, but I know he's a railer. I've seen him before. I think flatting here is basically your only option, to be honest. You probably agree with that.
Yeah, I do. I was actually going to say I would flat with Ace Queen here too. But if you're playing against a person who's a pretty good player, post flop decision maker, and has a tight opening range. I mean, this becomes right around the border of a hand that I would actually even fold too.
That's true. Yeah.
So I would fold Ace Jack for sure.
Yeah.
So
it's a bit closer though because there's one guy sitting out, so it's 5 in this.
Okay. Yeah. That's true. I didn't notice that. I didn't notice that.
Bit.
And of course, it's only against the players that have the tighter opening. I don't know about this particular player, but it's one of those hands that plays kind of weird out of position. So it's not it's not an auto call for me. I would ace queen is good enough that I just can't bring myself to fold it most of the time,
Yeah.
but it definitely is right at the board. Let's put it this way: I would be more inclined. I would probably call with ace queen and fold with ace jack, but I would be more inclined to fold ace queen than to call with ace jack. That's how.
I see
Yeah. So
where you're going. Yeah, I do agree.
yeah, just because I mean, ace queen does have the value because you would assume a hand like ace jack is well in the under the gun opening range, so you can get significant value from that potentially.
Yep.
So, okay.
And that's like on table 3, the king queen. That's the kind of board that I'm gonna be winning a lot on. That I would not have won if I had just called pre-flop. If I had just flat. So that's a bit of a plus for re-raising. Most of the time, I see that's gonna work there.
Interesting though.
Not work.
Well, again, this is kind of cool to have this conversation with you because it accentuates the differences in our styles really well.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
what I would have done is I would have called this pre-flop, and given that the board is pretty innocuous, so he wouldn't be able to continue against me unless he had an ace, and then couple that with the fact that I can turn the nut flush draw as well as some kind of gut shot straight draw. I would actually have just called pre-flop, and then I would check raise that flop. I would see that.
I do agree that it's super good against most opponents. Basically, it's kind of tough though to balance on that drive board against some better opponents. You're gonna get looked up pretty light, unless if you do want to check raise that kind of spot as a bluff. You do want to start check raising with like ace queen for value, and then keep on firing.
Well,
ace
of course,
for value,
and also I was thinking more to check raise on that flop, basically because against the kind of opponents that are going to fold anything that doesn't have at least an ace. Because when the opponent bets that flop, a lot of times his hand is going to be an ace or nothing. Yep. And I feel like by check raising, I'm going to win against his nothings the majority of the time. If I'm playing against an opponent who's astute enough to realize or detects an imbalance in my frequencies, and then might stick around with a hand that's absolutely nothing, 8-7, and just make my life difficult, then I wouldn't use that play as often.
And I'm also gonna. Would you consider if you flatted pre-flop and the board comes up? I'm gonna consider check calling a lot on these boards because that's not such a great board for him to 2 and 3 barrel me. Then I can pretty profitably check call and then hope it gets checked down, or that I either gets checked down or I pick up a good draw on the turn and do something with it. Or if he 2 and 3 barrels me, since I'm not expecting most opponents to be 2 and 3 barreling a lot on that type of board, I'm gonna be folding to the second barrel a lot because your hand is gonna be good a lot, like the king.
Yeah. No, that's true too, actually, I like that, and if usually if the turn is an innocuous card and he checks back, you can probably bet the river and fold him out of aceless one pair hands too.
Yeah.
So I actually like that too. It's I sort of said check raise off the top of my head, but that's if I was the more I think about it, and if I think I was in the flow of the game, I think check calling is even better. Yeah, I think that would. It's not just that it's better, but I think that's what I would have done too. I just said check raising because I saw the ace of hearts and got excited.
Let's say you have like queen jack of hearts, then it becomes a check raising.
Yeah.
And I had one last thing to say, but I just forgot it, so just roll it.
Okay. I'm curious to see what you do here. What are you going to do if you check 2 here on table 1?
On table 1, maybe that's what I was going to say, but I don't know. I kind of, let's say, read list against a guy who's limp calling, so we assume that he's a fish most of the time. I seriously don't know which one is best between betting or checking when I'm read list. As soon as I pick up a read that either he's gonna fold to multi-barrels a lot, or he's folding to my flop bets a lot, or he's not folding any pair like ever, or he's check raising with like he's check shoving with the ace of diamonds here or whatever. I'm gonna like switch my plays a lot, but completely readless, I don't have a clue. I think both options are basically as good. I think like delaying my c-bet or just c-betting it on the flop. I think I prefer a bit delaying it by checking back. Too. And when he checks it checks again the turn, I can fire it.
No, yeah, I do too. That's my preferred line because when you have a good hand on a monotone flop, a lot of good players are going to check that back and wait for like a brick and then bet. And then if he's a fish, if the board comes in a diamond, he checks again. You could probably win the pot anyway.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I do think a delayed c-bet's a little bit better. But I did think it was close, which is why I asked you, and I'm glad you think it's close too. So basically, ultimately, it becomes close to a neutral EV decision.
Yeah, totally. So let's see what happens. On table 3, the turn goes check, check. On table 1, I'm thinking, and I decide to check. Yay! That was close. And table 2 as well, my opponent fires out a pretty big bet.
Well, yeah, all kinds of interest, like information overload. I actually want to talk about table 3 here.
Okay.
I think that once you get that turn card, I think and he called your continuation bet. I think you probably should fire again on the turn, because I think a lot of times with the idea of firing 3 barrels, because I'm assuming he's not going to have ace king very much in his own range, so it becomes a good 3-barrel opportunity for you. Plus, presumably you've got outs to the king or queen, and you're rarely going to be able to show this hand down because he's probably going to have an ace in his hand. It's often going to be a medium ace. Do you not agree?
I totally agree, but I think it becomes a style, matter of style. I totally agree with what you said, but I would personally not do it because since I'm really aggressive and people know that I'm aggressive, I'm way too likely to be called down by like ace queen or ace jack or ace 10 or whatever. Basically, I'm not going to win the pot as often, but I'm just hoping here that he decided to call the flop with, and he could have done that like queens or jacks or 10s or 9-10 or something like that. He's going to have that type of stuff a lot, and then he's going to try to just check it down quite a lot. So I'm still going to win the pot sometimes, but I do agree that if you have a pretty tight image yourself, which is the most important thing here in that end, if you're against someone who's noticing that kind of thing, that firing 3 barrels is probably the best option, because basically the top of his range, unless he flopped a set and he's slow playing it, which could be probable, but his range is so heavily weighted towards a ace, one pair ace, like ace queen, ace jack, ace 10, ace whatever, one pair, that you are gonna make him fold these ends like pretty much always by the river if you have a tight image. I'm not doing that just because I'm gonna get the hero called away too often, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's fine. I think the fulcrum here, the pivot point for you to make your decision is whether you expect to be called down if you 3-barrel when your opponent holds ace jack or ace 10. And if you do expect to be called down, then you should play it the way you did. And if you think you've got significant fold equity against those hands, it's a very good turn card to keep barreling.
Yeah, and it's a spot where the best play just depends on your own image and what you expect your opponent to do with most of his holdings, basically. And I do agree that if it's kind of a nit battle, I like to call the battle of nit battles, because that makes sense. But yeah, if it's a nit battle, I do agree that firing 3 barrels is more profitable than trying to check down the end, I think.
Yeah, okay, cool. Which is specifically because that turn was a king, because it, I wouldn't do it on any other card, unless other than a heart.
Yeah, you're just very not likely to be called down by like ace queen or ace jack here, because you have to have complete hair in his mind to be barreling 3 times if you don't have like ace king, aces, or kings, and you could very well have aces, ace king, or kings, and most of the time he's just gonna talk himself into a fold if you don't have that much of an aggressive image.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think, so it comes down to the image. Okay, so now switching over to table two. It's kind of funny. Part one of this series, we talked so much theoretically, and now all of a sudden we're getting just hands everywhere to talk about. So I hope you're just going to call this bet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll let you go ahead and tell why now.
Yeah. Well, even before that, am I seeing that price there correctly? Is that 38 he's betting?
Yeah, into 40.
Okay, I actually have a comment here. I don't know what happened. I'm seeing this video for the first time, so I might make a total ass out of myself. But I would actually fold right now. Here's my thinking, okay? And this is a real subtle thing, but it's not that. It's subtle, but it's obvious. And this is one of the most important things you guys will ever hear from me. One of the things, this is almost something that it's almost like a little trade secret I'm tempted to just keep to myself. One of the things that I notice all the time, and I would say this is the single biggest tell from which I've made the most money over the years from people, and it's amazing to me that otherwise excellent players do this so often, is when they have a big hand, they try to squeeze out a little bit extra, and if they're bluffing, they try to save just a little bit. And the thing is, the difference in the amount, it's always relative to the pot. The difference in the amount is usually not that much. It's really small, but it's very obvious. Like it's if you're looking for it, and it translates the confidence that a player has in that hand. So I'm looking at this hand here on table two, and so this is a real subtle thing, and it might be like I might be just completely out of my mind, and I'll be really embarrassed if you call this guy down and he has he was bluffing or has ace 10 or something. But when I look at this bet size, it immediately, like, alarm bells go off in my head, and I am seeing it looks to me like he's just hit a big flop, whether that means ace king or maybe even much bigger than that, pocket fives or something like that, and he wants to squeeze out every last little bit. This is different. Notice that it's not that the amount of money is not that different, but my read would be totally different if I was facing a bet of like 33. Do you agree, or do you think I'm just crazy?
I totally agree. Absolutely. I think, yeah, that's really, really good. I think you just have, I would just never ever fold that ace queen, like, ever. And I think a subtle nuance I want to bring is the fact that you want to be aware that sometimes people just continuation bet close to the pot. Some players just do that with every single hand they have. So if he bets close to the pot every single time he continuation bets, then that kind of goes away. But I totally agree, and that's good on every street, on every board or whatever. Someone who is like switching his bets from like 2/3 to 3/4 most of the time, and then he starts betting just a little bit more than 3/4. I totally agree that it's gonna be value with a hand that he's confident with a lot of time, especially so if he's doing it pretty fast. Like, it comes to him and he bet close to the pot like in 2 seconds. It's like, okay, I have the nuts. I have like pocket five. I know an ace is gonna call at least one bet, so I just bet big, and that's pretty much it. And I totally agree. I could not ever fold that ace queen on the flop, but especially if I don't know if this guy just
I may have.
Of course.
Yeah, I may have overstated by saying folding on the. Although that's my instinct, by the way, when I see this, and I don't know what happened in this hand. I'm watching this for the first time, so that's. I mean, I might have. I mean, sometimes I do weird things like this, and I think
I folded.
Yeah, yeah. I'll be pretty happy if you fold it, but I really am. I just feel like again, it's probably stupid of me to take it this far when I haven't seen this player play before. But certainly, if I've seen this player before and seen them bet like 32 into a pot like this, this is one of those situations that would just trigger off all kinds of like alarm bells. You know what I mean? And
I seriously totally agree, and I think it's really, really a great rate that you just gave the world.
Yes, I don't know whether to apologize for that or what. I might have just cost myself a lot of money. But yeah. So I mean, I think what's going to happen if you call him here. I hope to God you don't raise him. I mean,
No, probably not.
but I think you're going to face another bet like this on the turn, and
I'm
then
not, and then I'm gonna have to fold on the turn. But then, not having see that guy play, I think I'm just gonna call and then see what happens.
all right. Well, let's see what happens.
And then I raise. I could. That's kind of spot you could consider raise if it's like button against big blind, and then you flatten the big blind. Flop comes like that, and the bet's a bit smaller or whatever.
Right. So
I would check raise a lot, but not
yeah, it's
turn
one.
again, and he bets big, and that's all the subtle nuances that turns a possible check raise into an absolute no way check raise for me.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And the jack on table one, I decided to go ahead and just fold the jack 10 on the turn when I faced a bet. I don't know if you find that.
No, no. I definitely I definitely think that's
okay,
fine.
that's the right way. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't against a player that you don't know,
Yeah.
about. You don't know whether you can bluff on the river, and you don't know whether it's one of those situations that we talked about. I forgot if it was. We've been recording back to back, so I forgot if it was in the last video or the beginning of this one. But what you had talked about, you don't know if the diamond is good for you or it's not good for you. You know what I mean? Like you don't know. He could easily check raise on a river. The board's paired now. I think your play's fine there. That
All
too.
right, cool.
And by the way, you see, giving myself a little pat on the back here. You look at that
Yeah.
piece again.
Yeah, I was gonna do that too.
He's betting 150 into 154. It's just not. You don't typically see people bet that much. It just looks like low key is trying to squeeze that little bit extra. You know what I mean? Like if the bet was
Especially on that board, which is so dry, like he could not be doing that with like a big draw who's trying to price himself in.
Yeah.
Which you could see on a very wet board, but here that's not the case like ever. So yeah, I totally agree that he has nuts basically like.
Yeah,
or
I mean,
not
you think about it. What's the best hand that he can have that you beat? It's Ace Jack, and I just can't imagine him doing that.
He's not sizing his bets like that with Ace Jack ever.
Right.
That's for sure.
So I think this is actually at this point now a very easy fold.
Yeah.
And by the way, I hope you fold here, and I don't end up like or the worst would happen if you call him down and it's like ace 8 or something. but no.
If that happens, we just skip the video and then.
Yeah, we'll have to re-record.
It skips to like 30 ends, like 30 minutes later.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty easy fold, and I think you were absolutely right on the flop that his bet sizing on the flop should have triggered some alarms right away.
Yeah, and of course it's hard to just call pre-flop with a hand like ace queen, then hit a flop like that and just check fold. But sometimes it's right. And I mean it's weird, it's anomalous, but be in tune to when your mind sends you signals like that. One comment I want to make, and again I'll just make it now, and this is going to end up either humiliating you or humiliating me, or humiliating me if you don't fold. But this is the kind of thing, if you're going to call hands like ace queen suited out of the blinds, especially against early position raisers, you have to be able to make folds like this.
Yeah.
If you can't, then, and some people, they just can't find it in them. You know what I mean? They're like, well, I called ace queen and now I hit it. I can't. What's the point of calling?
They know it, but they just can't.
Yeah. Then you should avoid these situations. You're not giving up a lot of EV by folding these pre-flop.
Yep.
And if you're going to call, you've got to find these folds. This one's in my mind at this point now, especially with the other guy in the hand too, it's a pretty easy fold now.
Yeah, I seriously hope I fold it. It's like the easiest fold ever. I'm taking way too much time.
Oh God, please fold.
Folded a while ago.
If you don't fold, I really hope you. I'm sorry about this, but I really hope you lose the hand because I'm going to come across as an idiot if you don't. Okay, I was really nervous actually.
Yeah, he's kidding. But yeah, I totally agree with everything he said, and that's a clear spot. We talked a bit about it earlier in part one, where like folding pre-flop is not necessarily a bad option if you're not comfortable playing that type of spot. Like you want to avoid, if you're not able to make these folds, you just want to avoid everything that involves that kind of fold. You want to avoid it pre-flop, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of, the principle is kind of the same as like if you can't make a lot of decisions, and you can't read boards and you can't make decisions,
Yeah.
then just play. Then you can just I don't want anyone to ever think I'm condoning this because I hate this, but then you can just be a short stacker, right? Because I mean, because it's
Don't do that.
no, please don't do that. Don't anybody do that. But I'm just saying the point is that if you it takes the tough decisions out of your hands, you know.
Yep.
And now nobody should short stack ever. I hate you all. But in when you are actually playing poker, if you can't handle those tough decisions, and by handling them, in this case, we're talking about being able to fold. But it's not just being able to fold; it's being able to make the right decisions. You know what I mean? If you're just like wimpily folding every time someone's betting when you have top pairs like in kicker, then you shouldn't be playing them either. The thing is, if you can't make the decisions and be able to handle yourself post flop, then there's no shame in avoiding those situations altogether. At least while you're working on your
exactly.
your
That's
game.
what I was going to say. First, work on it, and then if you're too much of a retard to have it work, just stop doing that, stop playing, and move down. But you have to work on it. But while you are working on it, and you're not comfortable with them, well, you can just avoid them if you don't want to lose.
Right. Exactly.
All right. So let's see if I try something tricky with my sevens, and I do.
I
Do you
don't.
agree
Yeah.
with that,
Yeah.
Bill?
Yeah. No, I think it's fine because especially with the queen and the 10 being both in the playing range, the bet is good on the turn because somebody with ace high that wants to just call down. Obviously, no one has a queen or a 10. And if somebody with the best hand that could be against you there is ace high. And I guess you could be against pocket jacks from the pre-flop raises.
I think I probably am gonna. If I get called on turn, I'm looking to shove the river. I don't know if you agree with that. I'm just gonna pose it because we got a ace king, which is prone to some discussion. But with my sevens, if like the original raiser calls on the turn, I think I'm gonna shove the river almost always, unless I have some kind of read that he might call me down 2 streets with ace high. But when he calls the turn, like you said, he pretty much never has a queen unless he checked it back on the flop, which is not that likely, especially with the fact that there are 2 queens on the board, so it's less likely that he has one. So, like, his better hand is like jacks or a ace high, and it could handle a bet on the turn sometimes, reading me on what I have actually, which is a counterfeited pair, and that I'm going to try to bluff. But there are not many players who are going to, like, some players, some good and reading players are going to be able to make the call on the turn with ace high, but not many players are going to be able to make the call on the river if I shove with ace high, just because I really could have like a 10 or a queen myself. So I think
although they have
the
to
pretty well, and I think against a lot of players, I'm looking to bet the turn to shove the river as well.
Although the one thing that I have to say is a lot of players would definitely call with ace high if you waited till the river to bet. But a lot of players with ace high won't bother calling the turn just because for fear of facing the river. And so therefore, I would try to know what kind of player I'm against. And if I believe that this particular player would not call the turn with ace high, which I think is true for a lot of players, then I wouldn't bluff the river. I would just give up because I would have expected to take it down on the turn against any hand that would then fold to the river.
And I think that's a really good example of being able to correctly assess specific things about your opponent. I mean, you don't absolutely know that he's calling with ace high or not on the turn. Like you have not seen that type of spot with showdown like 20 times. Of course, it's tough to have that precise of a read. But if you have a really, really good idea of how he is thinking and on what level he is, you should most of the time be able to assess correctly whether he's calling with ace high on the turn or not against you. And that's a big part of being able to read opponents on specific details, specific but very important details that turn the best play into either bidding or not bidding the river if you get called on the turn.
Yeah, exactly. And you made an important point there. One of the things that I've noticed that my students and other people that I've talked to sometimes have problem with is they feel that in order to get a specific read, they have to see that exact specific situation before. That's not necessarily true.
Exactly.
You can assimilate information from what you've seen about a player, how he handles a situation A, and then project how that would probably direct his behavior in a different situation that's not the same thing.
Exactly.
You know?
The way I personally do it most of the time is that when I see someone who's at a certain level, I pretty much always go back to my own poker career and I try to put myself into a mood of how was I thinking when I was at that level, basically. And if you can assess that pretty good, you are gonna have a good idea of how they are thinking right now. I don't know if I made that clear enough, but that's my way of like trying to get reads on how the other guys are thinking when I don't have that much of a read right now.
That's interesting. That is an interesting thing. It's probably a good way to go if you don't have any reads, but it's a little bit dangerous too because you don't well, what am I trying to say? It's
not always true.
Well, yeah, because players have different personalities and different thresholds of fear and people have more of a desire to see a hand, and some people are more inclined to learn to have the discipline to fold earlier in their career. So you know what I mean. I wouldn't necessarily use your own path to project onto others. But if you have nothing else, it's
Exactly.
it's a good, it's better.
There's always some kind of evolution in a poker player that like at first you're like going broke with top pair always, and then you realize that you should not do that, and then you realize that sometimes you should do that on like a drawy board, and then you realize you kind of realize these type of things, like everyone kind of go through this evolution of realizing when to go broke, when not to, and when to do the call or when not. That does not mean that they're gonna apply it. Sometimes people are just gonna apply it differently from people to people. But to be able to have a good idea of where the other guy is in his evolution, I think it's a good start to get kind of a read of how he's thinking about poker and how he's thinking about the situation that you're playing right now.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it.
That's pretty much it.
All right.
So let's roll the Ace King on table 3. I'm looking to 4-bet that and go broke 100% of time basically against that specific player.
Yeah, cut off against button against an aggressive player,
I think
you having like a crazy image too. Yeah, I think that's pretty standard. Although, what are you gonna do if you're called here? Just flat called.
That is gonna depend on the board. Like it's gonna be 100% board dependent and then player dependent. That like there's obviously no clear answer. And it's gonna be pretty tricky. If I do get called, sometimes I'm gonna like 3-barrel by betting super small if the board breaks, or I don't know. Most of the time, if I do get called and whatever the board is, the most likely thing that I'm going to do is to bet super small on the flop as kind of a continuation bet. But knowing that if you miss the flop, there's not much you can do because you cannot shove on me because I really could have aces or kings or whatever. And since the pot is already so big, you don't need to bet big. So if I do get called in the 4-bet spot, that kind of way, unless the board is something ridiculous like queen, 10, 9 with a flush draw, I'm not going to bet that. But if I think I can take down the flop either with 1, 2, or 3 barrels, I'm gonna like gauge that and try to go with that.
Interesting. Okay, so if you 3-bet, I mean the pot will have about 250 in there, and you're still gonna have about 650 effective behind.
Yep.
So now the let's say the flop is Jack 8-6. You're gonna make like a bet of like 100 or something. Like what are you gonna do?
Yeah, something like that.
Interesting.
Maybe even less. Like super small bet. Yeah, maybe 100. Yeah, 100 is good. I'm gonna bet like 100 and see where that takes me.
That's because the thing is like if I have a hand that I called a 4-bet with
Yep.
in position,
Yep.
and then my opponent bets on a flop of Jack 8-6, I'm pretty much calling that with 100% of my range.
Unless you have ace queen, you could have ace queen or like king queen. Let's say the flop Jack 8-6. You're gonna have ace queen and king queen some good percentage of the time, I think, especially king queen suited, ace queen suited or not. I'm gonna like just win the pot outright against these ends because it's just easier. But then if you're calling with like close to 100% of your range, I am gonna be second barreling sometimes and sometimes not. So you are gonna be trickier spot on the turn, like pretty much always.
Well, yeah, but I think me being in position, well, first of all, it's going to be very hard for me to have a hand that could be dominated by you, like King Queen, because if I had King Queen suited, I probably wouldn't 3-bet, and if I did 3-bet, I probably wouldn't call 4-bet. But
okay, I see a lot of players doing that, and I'm gonna play it myself that way sometimes against some players that I know are really prone to like 4-bet bluffing a lot, like too much with any two like let's say they 4-bet bluff with like Queen 10 or whatever.
Okay.
I do it myself sometimes. I am gonna like 3-bet the King Queen.
Okay, so fine, yeah. If you've got hands that King Queen is fine. If you're going to be dominating your opponent sometimes, just like he's going to dominate you sometimes, that's fine. But yeah, I'm just saying if my opponent's going to bet 1/3 of the pot, I'm, I mean, I almost can't find a hand that I would fold.
Maybe not on the first barrel, but then I have a really good spot of like second barrel on the turn.
Well,
If
yeah,
you
but
if you have like tens and then you call and then I second barrel and then you're in a very tricky spot no matter what I have.
well,
like,
yeah, but it's also puts you in a tricky spot because you have to 2-barrel. So it's sort of like
yeah,
instead
but
of
it's
making
me
it.
applying the pressure and I'm way more comfortable with that.
Well, yeah, but supposing I have a hand that I'm going to call you down with. Let's say I have pocket queens, or let's say I flop the set. Okay, I'm I'm still not gonna raise at any point when you're making bets this size. You know what I mean?
I totally agree, but it comes down to the fact that the guy is gonna have one pair, one weak pair, stuff like that, way more often than monsters. I don't mind that much getting caught, like when he has a monster, but that's not gonna happen super often compared to the times that he's gonna fold either to my second or third barrel. So it's high variance.
Yeah, I guess so. It's because I guess it depends on how weak you have opponents'
Range. Yeah,
4-bet calling range. Because I can tell you,
of course.
my 4-bet calling range is gonna be pretty strong.
But here I know that I'm against I win flips, and his 4-bet calling range is something from 7-9 suited to ace queen of suit to he could have aces to he could have 5-4 suited, he could have anything by calling my 4-bet. And I think it basically all this discussion comes down to the general level of aggression of the game that you're in. And most of the games that I'm in, 200 big blinds deep, tend to have a very high level of aggression just because of the way that I'm playing myself. Like, even if I'm against a nit, he normally nits, like, just go crazy and then they start doing stuff like that as well. So that's pretty much why I adapted my style of, like, firing super small barrels, because people are going to have a lot of questionable hands when they do call for bet. If you're against someone who's not having these weakish, weird ends, then it does not become.
Well, I was actually going to get to that next. If you 4-bet small enough and we're deep enough, and I happen to 3-bet with it, I would call, because one of the things people tend to do is 4-bet pretty small. So
I've worked on that. That 4-bet is a bit smaller than I do it nowadays at 200 big blinds deep. When I do it here at 124, it's not. Now I think I do it most of the time like 2.8, between 2.8 and 3.1x.
Okay, now that's a good solid 4-bet. Yeah, because what I was going to say is, supposing I decide to 3-bet, and we're deep with 9-7 suited, and then the guy 4-bets me small. I'm calling that in position 100% of the time. Now you're actually being a little bit destructive to yourself, I think, if you make a small bet and basically give me the opportunity to see 4 cards at least. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what all I'm saying is that I guess I'm arguing the merits of the small bet on the flop.
Yeah. I I really like it, and it worked really well in the games that I've played and the way that against the opponents that I've played. I think that's the good approach, but that does not mean that it is a good approach in some
Yeah,
others.
yeah. I guess it comes down to the old, every time when we've had differing opinions throughout this series and the last series, I think it comes down to um,
It
opponents'
depends.
tendencies. Well, of course, yeah, it depends, but it specifically with opponents' tendencies and our own body of work.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so, because like I mean, just to finish what I was saying with this, if I have 9-7 suited and I flop any pair, I'll call once. But certainly, forget about any pair. I'm going to call that 1/3 pop bet with anything, and a lot of
Yeah,
my hands are gonna flop a gut shot or perhaps like have a lot of turned draws. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
And then if you let me hit a lot of those turned draws, now I can call it a small second bet too, and then all of a sudden you're betting on the river when I have the nuts. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So
But at the
that
same time, you're gonna miss the flop. If you miss the flop, you're gonna fall to the turn bet sometimes. So I pick up a pretty decent size spot a lot of the time. And then let's say you call the turn again, but then you miss on the river, and I shove with my air. I just picked up a huge spot when I had air, basically. It's
yeah,
not
I
gonna
guess so.
work
Yeah,
every single time, but it's pretty powerful when it does work, obviously.
yeah. I mean, I guess it comes down to the relative size of the bets on the flop and
Yep.
turn. I guess you just can't be too silly with making them too small. I want to talk about a hand. This is just a good demonstrative hand with somebody who was making too small bets in a hand that we were deep. I got 3-bet. I had raised and got 3-bet, and I held Jack 10 suited, and I called out of position. And the flop came down Ace Queen something low.
Okay.
And I check called because he made a tiny little bet. He bet like one quarter of the pot. And he's actually a very good player, but he just shot himself in the foot with his bet size. He's actually a Blue Fire member, I think. Or he was at least. So he is a great player. One of my toughest opponents. And then the turn was another brick, and I checked, and he made like a 1/4 pot size bet, and I called again, and the river was a king, and I checked, and he shoved, and I called, and he had ace king or ace queen. I think he had ace king. And he types in there, what the hell are you doing? And I'm like, well, there was no point in which he didn't make it correct for me to do that. You know what I mean? And I just think
Yeah.
that that's the and supposing I missed and I checked and he shoved, he hasn't won that big of a pot because he's given me the right odds to be able to run him down.
Yeah, you of course you don't want to give the right odds with the right implied odds. That's for sure.
Yeah, and that's the only thing that I'm worried about when you're playing against a guy who has such a wide range that you don't know what he could have, is that if you're making bets that are too small, you're giving him the right odds to chase him down, especially if you're planning on taking a line that involves bet, bet, bet.
But most of the time when you're playing a four bet pot, he's gonna have good direct odds, but the pot to stack ratio is gonna be so small that he's not gonna have any implied most of the time. He's gonna have some implied odds, but when there's like a pot size bet left, his gut shot is not. Even if his direct odds are pretty good, it's so rare that he has some really good implied odds.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Let's play it.
Yeah. Let's go on.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. No. It's definitely a point of
But of course, like it's gonna depend. Like every single time you're gonna be playing a four-bet pot, which has been called, it's gonna depend 100% on my opponent and the board, the exact board like texture, the exact cards of the board.
Of course.
So it's tough to give an answer like right off the bat. That betting small would be my default play, but it might switch from time to time depending on my opponent and the exact texture of the board. So there's no clear-cut answer to that.
I think a good way of looking at that would be sort of almost like a parabola, like a peak. The drier the board, the smaller you can bet. Um, the wetter
Yeah.
it gets, the larger you should probably bet until it gets so wet that you shouldn't be betting, like queen 10-9 two suited or something, and then you should just be giving up on it.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Okay, cool. So Good discussion.
So with him 5-betting right now, I'm just shoving, of course.
Yeah, right. I mean, this is pretty standard. I think, like as you said, you're happy getting it in with him.
And funny thing, he's gonna be bluffing some percentage of the time.
I do have a question for you though. Let's suppose he makes this ridiculously stupid small 5-bet here. Supposing he had bet to like 300, okay, 315. Would you still shove?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I have the nuts right now against this guy.
I would actually prefer, if he had made it about that much, a call and then shove the flop. Just because you end up.
I really don't get why. To make him fold ace king?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because he's gonna have ace king himself flop.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times.
I don't think he's ever, even if I call and then shove the flop, he's ever gonna fold ace king.
You don't think so?
No matter what the board is.
Really? So, interesting. So you think that okay. Well, then it doesn't matter then. Okay, because I think
it's gonna be so rare. I think so.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. And also, before we go on, can you just review what's going on here on table 4?
Table 4, yeah. I raised the button, and the guy in the big blind called.
And he just led into you.
Kind of a fish, and then he leads the flop pretty small, and I just raised.
Okay, so it was like a small raise. The one thing that I mean, are you ever worried when he leads into the flop that some part, a decent enough part of his range could be ahead of you, such that if you get it in, you could be in a situation where you're way behind or racing?
Really not against that type of player who's buying in for 300.
Okay.
Really, really not. If it's a regular, and let's say it's a regular, and we're 150 big blinds deep, then I'm definitely not raising that flop, I think. Especially with a couple of backdoor hearts and backdoor straight, so I can call a lot of bets on turn and river, no matter how the board comes. I'm definitely not raising that flop. But in that situation, my hand is pretty much at the absolute nuts against a fish who doesn't even have 100 big blinds.
Okay. Cool.
You agree with that?
I do. I just wanted to. You said exactly where I was going. I actually like your play, and I would have taken the same line. But I was just gonna ask exactly. I was actually gonna use the exact same stack size that you used too. I was gonna say if he was 150 big blinds deep and a good player, I wouldn't.
I'm just flatting the flop like
right.
100%.
Yep. Okay.
All right.
So do you also agree here on table 3 that, because it's a line that I take when people put themselves in an awkward stack size amount with a 4-bet or a 5-bet, you agree that if you're in a situation that you're putting your whole stack in no matter what, if you have first action that against a player that will fold ace king themselves, you can call and then shove all flops?
Yeah. I never thought about that like ever, but yeah, it could be good.
Because I take that line a lot when people put themselves in an awkward stack size position, and I feel like it's working. Like, I mean, of course I don't know, but I feel like I'm folding out the other ace king enough of the time to make it worth something.
Yeah,
I mean, there's
I actually like it. I actually like that tricky play. Yep.
Cool. Okay.
I do. So we're racing, and I'm not gonna lose. I'm still confident at that point. I'm a huge luck box.
It was funny that you were talking with such confidence even on the turn.
But I that I want that flip. So most of the time, even at that point on the turn, I'm still confident. At least when I'm on. I'm no longer on a huge healer like I used to be. When I was on my healer, I was like, okay, no problem. I don't care turn. All right, cool. And now I squeeze ace king with so many colors. I think it's super standard.
Yeah. Oh, of course.
Even 200 big blinds deep.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then I get 4 bets, so I just ship.
You think, is that okay? You think? Like, is this guy who is? Well, yeah, it's you and your image, and I'm just wondering. Oh, plus this is that guy that you were saying that's on tilt, right?
I did not know at that point in the session that he was tilted yet, but I figured it out like maybe 5 minutes after that.
There are. Would there be some opponents that you would fold in this situation?
And not myself, not being me, because even some really tight players are gonna make moves sometimes because it's against me, and I'm gonna be squeezing that spot a lot.
Okay.
But I do agree that if you're a nit and you're against another nit in a big nit battle, that's a spot that I would fold sometimes. Yes.
Do you really need to be so insulting to me when you're saying that?
You're
No.
not a nit. You're not a nit like at
No,
all.
I'm just kidding. No, I'm just saying, I was joking because no, there are some players. I would say maybe it's a small percent. I'd say maybe 8 to 10% of regulars. But against those players, I would probably find a fold here because I'm either against another ace king, or at worst against queens. But then also aces and kings are a good part of the range, and so I would actually fold this against certain players. Certainly not against most.
There are players that are just gonna call with queens like 100% of the time here. So they are gonna have kings and aces, and they're gonna call with ace king as well. They're gonna have kings and aces 100% when they do that.
Right.
So against these type of players, I'm gonna fold, and it's gonna happen sometimes, but of course it's not the standard.
Right. Of course. I'm just making sure that.
Yeah,
I mean, the one thing that I think
we fold ace king pre-flop. Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's the point that I wanted to drive home, because I think one of the things that one of the leaks that I see in players that are otherwise excellent, and it's not a huge leak because there's very rarely a situation where you do want to be folding ace king pre-flop, but it's a common leak. It comes up often. Is that people are automatically, no matter what the action, it's ace king, so it goes in pre-flop.
That's really true, and I think you say that it's not a huge leak, but sometimes it seriously is a huge leak. Like, especially when we're playing super deep, when we're playing 100 big blind deep, it can't be that big of a leak. But like at, let's say, 300 big blinds deep, it's gonna happen pretty often when you do play these 200 big blinds deep tables on full tilt. Let's say you're 300 and up.
Yeah, that is ridiculous.
Four betting in position and then stacking up with ace king is just a disaster most of the time. Except if you have any kind of like special read, or you know that he's gonna 5-bet bluff or whatever, and then you use your ace king shove over. But most of the time against most players in most dynamics, like the guy 3-bets from the blind, and then you have ace king, you don't even look at your big blind, and then you're like, oh, ace king, I 4-bet and I go broke with that. And I see that happen a lot, and most of the time when you do go broke for 300 and 350 big blinds, you're against aces, and it's a gigantic leak because you just gave away 3 buy-ins basically that you should not have given away. So it's not gonna happen often, but it just has to happen like once every 20,000 hands that you make that huge mistake of going broke with ace king super deep, that you should never go broke with it. That it becomes super big mistake because it just cuts into your win rate a lot.
Yeah. That's a good point. That's a really good point. I had said it was not such a big leak because it's not going to happen very frequently that you should be folding.
But the pot is so big.
Yeah, but exactly. So that's well said. So I actually have a story to tell about an ace king hand that I played against somebody that had it, but we'll do that after. We're actually just about we've gone pretty long, so we can. You want to finish this hand, and then I'll tell the story, and we'll.
All right.
And then
I want to hear a sample story.
I mean, it's not like this.
Back in the days.
No, it was
a long time ago. Country. And I ship ace king.
It's actually a live. It's one of my live. I don't play live. I only played twice a year.
Oh.
And I haven't played this year because of the divorce. I don't want to deal with any of that. But this was one of my few times at Foxwoods. But it was an example of just the most grotesque overplaying hands of ace king. So one guy, we're playing 25-50.
Yeah.
And I think we were like $14,000 deep. Okay, I had a lot of money on the table. I had like 50,000. This guy sits down with like $13,000 or $14,000, and he posts behind the button. So he's on, and we were playing with a forced straddle. So actually, you know what? I forgot if it was 25-50 or if it was it may have been 10-25 with a forced straddle. I think that's what it was. And my fourth straddle, and it I had already looked at my cards, but I don't know that the guy that had posted had seen that I had looked at my cards or not.
Okay.
Right? So I had two aces, and so he gets out some raising chips, which obviously looks like a steal because and we were a little short-handed. We were playing like 6-handed or 7-handed, and he had just posted, so he had his dead money there too, right?
Yeah.
And I said you don't want to raise my straddle. I always re-raise, so don't do it unless you have a hand. And I said doesn't matter what hand I have in my straddle, I always re-raise it. And so this guy, he sits down, he glares at me, and he looks, and he's like, all right, well, just re-raise it then, and he raises, and then so everyone else folds, and I re-raised it, and then he re-raised me, and then I kept having this banter. I'm pretty friendly at the tables, like I always like banter and joke about and stuff, but this time I was just like, I was making it sound like I was playing this game of chicken, because I was like taking offense at him raising myself. So then I re-raised him, and he re-raised me, and then I was like, oh, it's a joke, and I shipped it all in, and he like practically jumped out of his chair with excitement, and I was like, oh my god, am I against the aces? But it was a number of re-raises that went by. I mean, I forgot what it was, but we ended up getting like 14,000 in. It was just ridiculous for him to, because also, I don't know how often you've played live, but people, you go to Vegas a lot and stuff. I mean, people are not nearly as aggressive, so.
Pre-flop, like there's no three betting.
Yeah, so I mean, ace king is never ever good in this spot, right? and so you should. So anyway, I shipped it all in for my last like 14,000. The funniest thing about it wasn't so much that he called, because granted it was a post against the straddle, but it was just his excitement. Like even if I was bluffing, like ace king is not that good against 7 deuce in such a massive pot. You know what I mean? Yeah. It was like he had just trapped me with like the stone cold uncatchable nuts. He's like, I go, and he's like jumped out of his chair, and he throws his cards up on the table, and it was ace king, and his chair falls backwards. It was like, and so then I turned over my aces, and he looked like he was gonna cry. And then
his face at that exact moment.
Well, you should have seen. It was like, you know what it reminded me of? Did you ever see? Sorry about this, guys. I hope this is entertaining you guys. It's not that instructional, but
they probably already left.
yeah. There's no more poker, so if you guys want to shut off the video and you're not interested in the story, by all means. No, did you ever see the video of the World Series when Chris Moneymaker won, and he gets it all in with his 3 queens against Ivy's full house?
Nope.
Oh, basically it was the action was such, it was Moneymaker had pocket he had ace queen, and the board was queen 9 something, right?
Yeah. And
he bet, and Phil Ivey went all in, and it was like, it was just so, it was such an obvious situation that Ivy had to have a big hand. I don't necessarily say that ace queen should have been an auto fold there, but it would have at least have been one that he would have at least had to worry about. Maybe he's against a full house, right?
Yeah,
he was. Yeah. He's either got that or he's got a queen, and the stacks were deep and everything. So, and it was really the thing that like I remember about that, and I'm sure some of these people that are still here listening to this have seen this footage. He like jumped out of his chair. He was like, "Oh!" You know what I mean? Like, and like flipped it up. It was just like, ha, like I nailed Ivy. You know what I mean? And it was actually a sad end to the story, because Ivy had pocket 9s, but the river was an ace, and it knocked him out.
At least it made him do some exercise.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah, but that's how this guy was. Like when I went all in for the 14,000. He's like, oh, he flips up ace king, and like I mean, it was the way he was so excited when he called. I was actually thinking, oh, okay, because even with kings, I would have thought that he would have been a little nervous. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I would have thought that it's like aces against aces. So then here's what happens. There's actually at least one Blue Fire member at the table here. It's actually Jeet, who I did the member review videos from, so he'll remember this. So I hope you're getting a kick out of this, Jeet. So then the flop came with two kings. Would you believe it? So I couldn't believe it after all that. Like I totally like
the 30K pot.
yeah, and I'm just like, I was just like. I was out of my mind, you know. And then, would you believe the river was the case ace? So, all's well that ends well, I guess.
Yeah. Pretty sick, pretty nice.
So, speaking of ending well, that's all I got. I hope you guys tolerated my story. Thanks for indulging me.
That was really good. That was good.
So
yeah,
cool.
For the 5 people still listening.
Yeah, you think there's 5? Yeah.
So.
We'll see. Maybe we'll get some comments about it, and we'll know someone heard that. Well,
right, so,
at least you listened. So thanks for that, Martin. I still got you awake here at what is it? Almost 3 o'clock in the morning.
My pleasure.
Okay. Cool, guys. Well, hope you're enjoying the series. Do give us feedback as always. And I guess we will start recording some more in whenever. Just let me know, Martin, when you're free again. And
yeah.
I guess that's it.
That is it.
Bye, guys.
Bye.